Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to the Overtop podcast. My name is Nick Lorenzo, and I'm the host of this show. Today, we have a very special guest. We have with us Kevin Herron-Jones. He's an author, poet, journalist, editor, actor, and lecturer. And Kevin is best known for his profound and powerful delivery. Kevin, how are you, sir?
Very good, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Pleasure is all mine. Kevin, I want to start talking a little bit about, how do you transition from publishing poetry to creating more kind of a theatrical spoken word kind of experience, My question is, when did you, because, your work blend poetry, storytelling, and performance, when did you realize that writing was not enough, that you had to perform your words to find a better connection with your public? When did that start?
I think it started when I was just getting into the poetry scene. I had always loved writing. I always wrote short stories as a kid, and I always wanted to get my short stories published. And I found that doing poetry was probably an easier way to get recognized. So I started going to open mics and going into the city and trying to find places where I could perform, or at least just try to recite my poems. I wasn't trying to perform them yet. I was just trying to say them. And I remember just being very nervous and jittery, right? Trying to get up on there, get up on stage and read from a loose leaf of paper. The paper would be shaking while I'm talking. And the audience was kind. I know I wasn't very good, right? But I had a good message. And so that's when I kind of realized, I started to see other poets, and I realized that this poetry thing it's not just a reading. It is a performance. It is kind of like how in theater they do monologues, right? You take a story and you act it out. In my case, if I'm doing poetry, I'm acting out my own life, right? So, that's when I kind of realized it. And I said, you know what? Let me just take some, the things that I've seen. I was in drama class for a little bit in high school. So I said, let me take some of the things I've seen there. Let me take some of the things I see people do on theater, and let me incorporate that into my poetry. And plus, when I was younger, my father used to make me do what you call recite Bible verses for like our Sunday school programs. And so, in front of the congregation, I would have to read these little poems and little Bible verses. And the thing he would always tell, he would stress to me, is like, when you're talking, if you talk about the sky, point to the sky. If you talk about the sun, make that action. If you talk about the waves in the ocean, make that action with your hands. So I always had that in the back of my mind to do. And so when I decided, yeah, let me just try and put this all together, that's kind of when it happened.
Okay, okay. It's interesting that you mentioned, performing kind of a little bit of a performing acting. I see that on on your work with listening fiction, which is a podcast of yours, which is about collection of short storytelling that you convert into an audiobook. I see a little bit of that, the performing part of you. And tell me a little bit how that came into your life. How did you decide to go ahead and create listening fiction?
Let me see. I was watching a play one day, and I was just watching the play, and I said, you know what? It would be really a cool idea to read short stories in front of an audience. Now, I've known that reading fiction in front of an audience is nothing new. Authors do it all the time when they have their author readings and whatnot. But I knew, like, sitting there watching the play, and I don't even remember what play I was watching at the time. But I said, you know what, I can build something with this, right? I know I have the experience as a poet. I'm already performing as a poet. Why can't I perform short stories the same way that I perform poetry? I was like, it's all the same. They come from the same place. So then I had the idea. I said I should write microfiction, right? Short stories that are 1,000 words or less. And I said, make everything probably about 3 minutes to 5 minutes long. Same way you would just put together a musical album, right? Or even same way comedies or comedians, they put together their comedy albums. And I said, you know what? I can do that. I can break up each short story and, make a little album with it,
That's nice.
right? So
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's actually, I was listening some of the story while I was preparing for this conversation, and it's really nice. I like the work. It's very, as you said, it's very short. It's very, how do you say it? In this world that we don't have a lot of time to sitting for an hour, 30 minutes, is very, you can digest easily and still get the message. I like it. let's talk a little bit about Black Like Me, which is one of the short stories.
Mm.
And the question I have on that is, Kevin, it's interesting. It's about crime that takes place, carjacking, which is something that happens unfortunately every day. But the part that really caught my attention is maybe shouldn't, I don't know. We're two Black men talking, that happened, but it's how the way you narrate that, touch on the racial component, of this type of situation. Tell us a little bit about that and why do we as Black men have to go there? Our mind, when that happened, have to go to that place. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So yeah, Black Like Me. In this case, this one is not fiction. This is nonfiction. So it does tell the story a little bit about my life growing up. And yeah, as Black men, we always have these experiences where we're going to face people who are going to push us to a certain level. They're going to test our resolve. Sometimes they do it knowingly. Sometimes they do it unwittingly. But either way, we still experience it. And we experience the brunt of it. And so, as Black men, yes, we come to now to internalize those aggressions and those microaggressions that come at us from our white counterparts. And sometimes it's not even white counterparts. Sometimes it's people of other cultures. But growing up, I wanted to illustrate that in Black Like Me. I know a lot of the experiences I had either as a young child, as a teenager, and then as a young man. And I tried to put those stories together. And I found, a bunch of, anecdotes, little things that have happened in my life. And I said, you know what, I'll squeeze them all together in a 3-minute poem/story and tell, the experience of what I've gone through.
You see, but another question I have on that is more on the subject of racism, if you will, maybe not racism, but a racial question is why it's interesting. You tell about the story on Black Like Me, and you go back and say, well, I remember when I don't know if it were you or the people that were part of history thinking, okay, there was a crime. I think he's not a black person. Why do you think we are past those instances, that impulse for us to think like that, or even our parents? Is that have we made progress or still stuck there? Or is it our own conscience that betray us? Tell me what's your take on that?
Yeah, I like that you asked that question because I think we're past it to a point, but we're not completely past it. I know that, and as you see in the story, like mothers and aunties and grandmothers, they're nurturers, right? They're worried about their children and about their children's children, right? The children that aren't really theirs. And I think as a community, we kind of we look upon how we're viewed by everyone else. The media doesn't help, right? Or it hasn't helped. I remember throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we would see, Black people put on the news in not the best light, right? And if it was something that, if it was a crime that was done, it was over publicized. Do I see that still happening now? Yes. Not to the same degree, but it still happens. And so I think now with the younger generation, we don't really look at that situation the same way our parents did. We're not wishing that the person who committed the crime is not Black, although in our hearts we hope not, right? We do hope not. And I think that's kind of still widespread, but I don't think it's not the same impact that it would have with our parents because once again, they were trying to, when like here in Canada, my parents had come to this country trying to make a life for themselves along with so many other immigrants who had come. And the last thing they wanted to be pegged as, one of those immigrants that need to be deported and sent back to where they came from. Right. And so that was always the thing. I remember there was a time here where people were being deported because if they had committed a crime, they're going to get sent back out of the country. And so none of our parents wanted to see that happen to their children or anyone else they knew, in the neighborhood. And so I think that's why it loomed really heavy on their heads. For us now, we don't really see it as much. And I think that we're a little bit more home. We're more at home here in this country. And a lot of us are born here or been here so many years. We do call this place home. But we still have our struggles and we still have this fight. But yeah, I don't think it is prevalent now that wishing and that hoping that every person you see on the news who did a crime is not Black.
If you were to activate your crystal ball, would you tell
Mhm.
me that as we progress, as we get into, in the, I don't know, 20 years from now, will we, Black people and other minority, will we be facing the same challenges that your parents face or yourself as? Will your kids still be facing the same challenge you believe? I know we cannot predict the future event, even though I said about the crystal ball. How do you foresee race relations here in North America, North America?
It's really tough because I think although we're becoming more understanding of each other, we have more allies than we've ever had before. But still, like over the past couple of weeks, what did we see? The United Nations and Ghana had set up something to say that yes, slavery was a huge crime against humanity, and they weren't asking for anything other than acknowledgement. And there were still three countries that said, "No, we don't acknowledge it." Right? And there was other countries that kind of abstained and just kind of stayed on the sidelines. When that happens, then there's no improvement with race relations. There's no improvement in the atrocities that have happened in the past, which means those ones who have gained wealth from it, who have gained recognition and who have built their countries, if they do not recognize it and do not care enough to say that, yo, you know what? Our forefathers have done something wrong and maybe we should try to reverse it. If they do not care enough to do that, then relations in North America will not become better. They will not improve. And we see that happening a lot in the States right now, right? And so a lot of people don't like the United States right now. I'm hearing this all the time. You see it on social media, right? Because they know the position the United States has taken.
I understand your point. And on that, it's interesting on that when you mentioned UN, it wasn't even a binding resolution. I mean, there was no legal ramification. And yes, that happened, three countries still said no, they don't recognize. Talking about your work, Kevin, you have mentioned that your writing, you use your writing as a form of education to entertainment. What do you call entertainment? I can't say the word correct, but educating to entertainment. Is there a balance you have to strike between entertaining and that people take your work seriously, that you can still become relatable? Is there a fine line you have to walk?
Yeah, you know what? Well, see that term, I didn't even coin that term. That term I heard from the rapper KRS-One. He's the first one I ever heard use this term edutainment, and that's where I learned it from. And that's where I learned that yes, you can be entertaining, you can have fun with music, you can uh, dance and be funky and do great things with music, but you can also help people learn, right? And I had learned a lot through his music, right? There was so much teaching which came through his music, and it forced me to go look up things myself. Whenever he had brought up any type of struggles, anything dealing with the Black community, anything dealing with politics, I went, boom, researched it, found out, and I said, oh, okay, this stuff is true. When we talked about the Bible, I would look it up. I was like, oh wow, this stuff is true. And so yes, there definitely is a way to entertain and educate at the same time. And we see that in, documentaries. You see this in good movies who actually take the time to teach the listeners or the watchers, their audience, a little something more than they had before they turned on their radio or turned on that song or turned on that movie. And so definitely, yeah, there is a balance. There's a way you don't really have to tiptoe, but you have to make sure that sometimes, because sometimes people don't want to be preached to, right? People don't want to be, they don't want to be like, yelled at and spoken at all the time. So you have to find a way to gracefully put things in, right? You're not trying to sneak into education, but you just want to put it in such a way that they can consume it and enjoy it. It has to be digestible. And that's something I always take pride in and trying to make my work digestible so that the youngest person, the oldest person in the room could understand it and take what they need.
Absolutely. Speaking about entertainment, education, one thing that I always want to know when I have a guest on my show, and if this guest is someone from the minorities, like myself, I always want to know what's their take on, because black people. Let's talk about black people. We, at least in America, and I want to believe in North America, including Canada, people they're very knowledgeable about the culture. Blacks, influence the culture in a very decisive, heavy way in North America and worldwide. But sometimes I don't see the same. I'm from Africa, so I'm coming here as a visitor, if you will. I don't see the same interest, engagement when it comes to politics, things that really affect our lives. I see active in when it comes to racial discrimination. But there is more than just that. There is local election, things like that. Do you see this change? People, black people are still very interested, very influential in popular culture, but now migrating or getting more interested, more involved.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's that viewpoint that we used to have as Black people, where we always look at it like, oh, who we voting for? We're voting against the worst evil, right? We used to look at like nobody represents us, so we don't care about politics so much. I
Mhm.
think that has changed, or is changing at least. I think people kind of recognize, you know what, we kind of got to be a little bit more part of the process. Even if you don't vote, you're still trying to find a way to educate yourself as to what's going on. People are not in the dark anymore. Plus, social media makes it a lot easier for people. People who didn't really know so much about politics, they pop onto their social media feeds and they learn so much more, right? And then, of course, you still have to do your own research, but at least something is there that's kind of that you can tap into really easily. A lot of times people would have to sit there and watch the news, maybe read the newspaper, and maybe a lot of people didn't want to do that a lot, right? Now
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
so like once again, it's digestible, right? So
Yes.
politics and news have become a lot more digestible. It's right in your hand. It's in your cell phone, right? You can't get away
Yeah.
from it. You click on one thing, is something else is going to come. So you're going to be involved in politics one way or another, right? We can't
Yes.
get away
Yes.
from it. So I think as Black people, yes, we are becoming more interested in what's going on in our countries, what's going on in our lives. It's right in our face, so we can't ignore it any longer.
Saying,
And they're not restricted to one news viewpoint, right? They can get other viewpoints now. We can watch the news from another country, right? From another part of the world and hear their viewpoint along with our viewpoint here in North America. So that makes it a lot better because now we have more of a broader view of what's going on here in politics.
you know, is that the fact that we're more exposed to international events, what's going on in other countries, is a good tool for us to better understand, our internal politics here in North America, either Canada or the US.
Yeah, I think so. I think being exposed to what's going on in other cultures allows us to see better what's happening here at home. And so being exposed, yes, definitely. We're going to see that. We're going to be and we'll learn more about what's happening here at home because what our countries are doing out in the world, out with other countries, now they can't hide that. Right.
Mhm.
And we get the feedback from people from other countries, how they look at our countries and what our countries are doing. And so there's no hiding, right? And
Absolutely.
I think that's really great. I think that forces there to be some accountability, right? So we can hold our countries, hold our governments accountable for the things that they're doing, especially when they're going abroad to different countries.
Yeah, and I believe one of the examples is what we talked a little bit ago. For example, this non-binding resolution by UN that three countries turn it down or said no. I mean, if you go back 30, 40 years, maybe that would something that would just happen over there in New York. Nobody would ever never know about it, and would
Mm.
be just business as usual. So that's an example. One thing I want to talk about, the other thing is, Kevin, is you founded Poetic, you found the Poetic Soul, and in hopes to build the speaking word movement in Toronto. Do you think you accomplished that in terms of building that movement in Toronto? And what lessons did you learn about that experience?
Well, when I first had the idea of creating this business called Poetic Soul, really it really just came out of wanting to see myself be published. I wanted to have some of my poetry published. And I knew I was doing a lot of shows, I was performing in a lot of places, but I didn't have any merchandise. And so
Uh-huh.
at the time I said, you know what? I have to find a way to, have something to sell. People are asking for things. They want to hear music. They want to hear, poetry recorded on CD at the time, right?
Uh-huh.
They want to see books. And so I remember distinctly during that time too, a lot of poets were recording were burning, remember burning CDs, right? So they would just record this stuff on a CD, burn it, and it would be cheap, right? It would be just like they'd have their name scribbled on the CD, not even an insert, no jacket for the thing, and they would sell it. And they would sell it for 10, 15, $20 if people were buying it. And
Yeah.
I said, you know what? This is great. I said, but I want mine to look a little bit more professional, right? I want to take this a lot more seriously. So I said, let me put in the time, find out how I can make it look proper. Let me get the proper inserts that go into a CD, into a CD cover. Let me make sure the CD itself has a picture on it. Right. And then I said, even more so to stand apart from a lot of people who are just recording CDs or poetry on CDs, let me get a book, right? Let me publish my own book. And I saved my money. I put things together. I got with a bunch of friends with, who some people who did graphic design, some people who helped me with the layout. We all worked together. I employed my friends, and we put together Poetic Soul so that I
Mhm.
can start putting my stuff out. So that's how the imprint really happened. And I started selling books. I started selling my CDs, my spoken word CDs, my music, and that's really how I got started.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, your creative mind at work there. Kevin, I have a couple more questions before I let you go. My next question is that a lot of your work is rooted in helping the young generation not to limit themselves, to find their voice in the world. That's what my understanding. Tell me, in your opinion, what do you think needs to be uh, the big mindset shift for young creatives so their word, their voice is heard loudly and has an impact in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one is just the belief that they can do it. That was something I struggled with really early too, is because here in this country, number one, if you want to get yourself published, get a book published, whether you're writing poetry, short stories, or a novel, it's a very hard process, right? Very hard to get traditional publishers to notice you. And there's going to be a lot of rejection. So the first thing I
Mhm,
kind of impart to young people is that, if you want to get into this business and you want to kind of break through these walls, you have to keep pushing, right? Because you're going to get a lot of rejection. Rejection is a part of the game, right? No matter who you are. Now, that goes for writers of all cultures. But now, Black writers specifically, yes, there seemed to be a cap, or there seemed to be something that we couldn't break through, right?
mhm,
Most recently now, you see publishers are turning around saying that we are giving priority to some of the marginalized communities. And so there's an in, right? Especially after we had the pandemic and George Floyd, with his killing and everything that happened there, you started to see a shift, right? That shift now, we had kind of a little paradigm shift. That shift now is kind of gone. It's kind of leveled out, and so
mhm.
maybe we're not getting as noticed as we were before, but the opportunity is still there. So you have to still keep pushing, right? And the next thing is, if you're into poetry, you need to do a lot of writing. Poetry or just fiction, you need to write. You need to write often. I
Mhm,
learned that I have to write every day. I didn't think that I had to write every day. But I thought I could just write when I'm inspired. And that's what a lot of young
mhm.
people ask me. They say, "Oh, how do you stay inspired?" I stay inspired by keeping myself inspired, by writing every day. If I didn't write every day, then I would sit back and just sit down and wait for the next opportunity for lightning to strike. And sometimes lightning will strike for months, years, and then you don't write anything. So why not write something every day, even if it's a paragraph? Try to write something every day. Then the well never runs dry. You can always dip the bucket into the well. Something's going to
Yeah,
come out, right? You always have something to drink. And so that's what I say. Write. Try to write every day. If you were in a sport and you're in athletics, you coach, right? Your athletes have to play every day. If they don't practice every day, they're not going to get better. And that's the same thing I tell writers. Write every day.
absolutely.
You have to practice your craft daily. Otherwise, you're not going to get better. And those are the main things that I find. Yeah.
What can we expect from Kevin, the rest of 2026? What projects are in the pipeline?
2026, we're going to still have another Listen Fiction album coming out, another audiobook album. That will probably be in the fall. We'll have that ready to go. And then also a live production of Listen Fiction. So Listen
Oh,
Fiction Live. And something we want to take to the theaters, something we're taking to auditoriums and doing a live show, right? Same way, like I said, when you would see a monologue being done in the theater, I want to have short stories being performed in front of a live audience, right? And I think that would be a lot of fun. There's so many ways you can do it, right? And I've been playing with a lot of ideas, but I'm going to start recruiting some other authors, some poets, some storytellers, and I don't even care what kind of medium that you tell your stories. You can tell it in rap, you can tell it in poetry, you can tell it in jokes like comedian. I don't care, as long
mhm.
as you're telling a story. I'm going to recruit you to come on stage and be a storyteller for this Listen Fiction Live platform that we're creating. So these are the things that I'm looking forward to most. And of course, more writing, more fiction I'm writing for the young people. I have a continuation from my last book that I'm working on called Not Talking About You. And yeah, a lot of great things in the work. It's an exciting year.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you very much. Kevin Herron-Jones, author, poet, journalist, editor, actor, and lecturer. Great guy, talented one. Kevin, thank you. I really want you back on my show in a few months once you have something new to bring to us. And again, I appreciate your patience. Hopefully, we're going to have a new, final product of this conversation. And until I speak with you again, you take good care of yourself, okay? And but because I know you're gonna keep on being successful. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all the love that you showed, and it's great to be here and speak with your audience as well. So I hope everyone enjoys Listen Fiction and anything Poetic Soul. Look for me, KevinHeronJones.com, or at Kevin Heron Jones on all social media platforms.
Kevin, stay safe and we'll see you soon.
All right, buddy. Stay safe. Take care.